Okay, everybody, I think we can start things off now. So welcome one and all to this webinar, Documentation Best Practices in Revit. So my intention here is to show to people I'll start again. My intention is to assist people and provide some ideas to people who are faced with the challenge of going from the 3D modeling side of things in Revit and then getting those drawings into working documents. Now, the challenges that everybody has, of course, is that can be quite time consuming, and also that in any documentation we have standards that we need to apply across our office or personally, and we want those standards to be easily achievable, and we want them to be repeatable. Obviously, as I said, it's time consuming, so we want things to be as efficient as possible. So we have tool sets inside Revit that allow us to make that transition from 3D into 2D as efficient as possible. We've got a number of resources that already exist inside Revit with regards to elements that have been already created for us that we can use to assist us in making working drawings, detailed drawings. And we can, once we've just got a little bit of a bit of understanding of how to create content, we can actually create our own customized content, which can speed up the whole process of going from the 3D into the 2D documentation. So again, what we want is a system inside Revit that is repeatable and consistent, so our drawings look the same. And so we'll be looking at how you can use the tool sets inside Revit to organize your views efficiently, whether that be being able to see them in the project browser properly without just having a whole big pile of drawings or of images there, and also looking at how to set up new views quickly and apply view templates and so forth to these new views that you're creating, so that you're actually locking views to a preset visibility graphics. And that's really where you start to reap the benefit in Revit of setting these things up, because you start to become much more efficient. So as I said, we've got this thing in Revit called Browser Organization. Some of you may have played around with it, some of you may not have, but the idea of that is that it actually allows you to show your views more in a more practical way in the browser, the project browser, rather than just picking the default way that Revit does it. So what I'm going to do is go through an exercise, just a hands-on exercise, and I'll just be using a sort of a generic example file that ships with Revit. The intention there is that I guess I'm demonstrating that these are universal concepts, these are universal tools that we all have. They're not necessarily something that has to be especially set up. So I'm just going to use what's called the RAC, which is Revit Architecture Basic Sample Project, straight out of the box, so to speak. Just wait for Revit to have its little think. So that file is actually available anytime anybody who's installed, I think anything from Revit 2015 onwards will have this basic sample project, amongst others, sitting in their, it's actually in the program files folder, the Autodesk Revit folder, and then there's a subfolder in there called samples. Not quite sure why they put it there, but that's just the location that they decided to put those files into. So, pretty basic sort of project. It's put together by a guy down in Autodesk in Sydney, actually, called Sam. Just a bit of trivia there for you. It ended up in every copy of Autodesk Revit throughout the world. So a bit of Australian success story, hey? Okay, so by default, now Revit actually applies what's called a browser organization to the way that it displays all the views, sheets, and so forth in your project browser. If you've never played around with it, you don't realize that, and it's a bit like a lot of things in Revit. Revit does a lot of things behind the scenes without you sort of knowing that it's doing it. It's only when you start to delve into it that you realize that there's things going on. So if I right-click on where it says Views All and go Browser Organization, one of the things I can do very quickly, now these are actually already preset in this particular project. You'll find that the metric architectural template has these in it as well. So if I just click the Apply button, and if you have a look over at the project browser, when I click that, you'll notice what happens. And just to explain what happens, apart from the fact that a whole heap of views disappeared, what's now happening is this particular method of organizing the browser is actually applying a filter. And I'll just go back in a second and actually show you that filter and how it works. But at the moment, what it's doing is it's not showing me it's showing me only views that have not been placed on a sheet. So if you can imagine, you've got a very, very large project. You've been given the task, or given someone the task of getting all those views onto sheets. Having a filter like this that you can just switch on temporarily, at least, whilst you're placing things on sheets, can certainly be very useful to the person who has that task. So if I take this north elevation and drop it onto the sheet, you notice that it's now disappeared off that list of views. Now to just go to that actual filter itself, if I click on Not on Sheet, which is the one that's been applied, you'll see that currently I've got this filter. It says the parameter it's looking at is sheet name, and it's doing a test. It's saying, look at that, and if it's equal to none, then essentially allow the view or whatever it is to be seen in the project browser. So essentially, when something's not on a sheet, that parameter is essentially 0 or empty, and so therefore the filter is allowing it to be seen. So to give you a quick idea of how you can actually create a little bit more organization yourself, if I just click on New, I'm going to make a new type of browser organization, and I'm going to call it Type and Discipline and Level, and no prizes for guessing what this is going to probably do, but anyway. So I'm not even going to apply a filter. I want to show every single view. I just want to go to Grouping and Sorting, and the first thing I'm going to do is, now in Revit world, all views, just like everything else inside Revit, are families, and they have different view or different family types. So we'll just put on Type and Discipline. Now, because this project here, I don't think actually has any different disciplines of views, this probably won't make much of a difference. If you were working in the MEP side of things, and you had plumbing drawings, HVAC drawings, electrical drawings, this ability to sort things by discipline can be very powerful, because that's really what you want to be looking. That's, if you're searching for a drawing, that's the most logical way of breaking up the project. And then we'll go to Detail Level. Oh, sorry, it's not the most logical, it's a logical way to do it, and then obviously by level or whatever other criteria you've got, I guess. Anyway, we'll click OK. One thing I always forget in this is to click the little tick box, because that's what actually changes it to that particular browser organization. And we'll click OK. So what we've now got is we've got a number of different it's basically changed the sort of hierarchy of the way it's now showing things. So we've got building elevations now are all grouped together, and then beneath that we've got the architectural discipline, and then beneath that we've got the drawing names. So in this case, as I said, it's not a multidiscipline project, so that probably doesn't have quite the same impact as it might do if I was working on say, an MEP project. I'll just set it back to all. That's just plain vanilla. Oh, I better go back and make sure I apply that. Okay, so that's just something I wanted to explain to people. There is another little trick too, which I will mention. And again, this is probably something that a lot of you have already realized anyway, but when you're going to print, obviously one of the things that you can do is you can create print sets. So, excuse me, I'm just getting over a bit of a flu, so please excuse me if I do a little bit of the horrible cough as I go. Anyway, so what I can do is if I just switch off views, for example, and say I had a preliminary set of drawings, these first three, I can go save as, and I can call that, say, preliminary. So what I've done is effectively taken these sheets and I've just set them together as a sheet set. Now that's all good and well, and that means that when I go to print, I can now grab that sheet set and very quickly isolate those as the particular sheets or views that I want to print. But something that's not perhaps immediately apparent is that that same set of drawings can also be used if I go to export. So if I go to DWG, for example, I can actually go down to that preliminary set and I can export those views using the same criteria. So that's just something to be aware of, and also in the context of browser organization. I haven't mentioned it up to this point, but you can also change the way that Revit actually organizes sheets. So for example, I could go in here and make a filter that just shows me only my preliminary drawings, the ones that are in that particular sheet set. So I could go filter by print set equal to, usefully in Revit when we do have parameters in here that are populated for a particular, values for a particular parameter, Revit actually usually gives me a little drop down. So if I go preliminary, then what's going to happen is Revit's only going to show me now. Oh, did I do it again? I beg your pardon. Go back. Try that again. Okay, there it is. Okay, so it's only showing me, it's actually got preliminary there in brackets, but it's only showing me now the sheets that are in that preliminary set. But you could also use that as a method of organizing your sheets. So you don't have to just put up with the default organization that's shown here. I could, for example, just go in here and go to sorting and grouping, and I could sort things by sheet name and number, and then let's see what we've got. Sheet issue date, for example, and then essentially we're just organizing things a little bit differently. So that, that's not obviously maybe something that you might want to do, but that's just to be aware of the fact that there are ways of organizing this, including the sheets, as opposed to just putting up with the default organization. I'll just set those back to all. Okay, that's good. So what I'd like to do now is have a quick look at something. Again, this is something that's not immediately apparent in Revit, but I guess when you start to think about the concepts in Revit, when I've sort of done the fundamentals training, conducted that training over time, I guess these are the things that start to make sense. Okay, so first of all, by default, Revit really only has one type of floor plan in this project. So what's not immediately apparent is that I can make different subtypes of views. So, for example, I want to make a new, in the same way as I could make a new family type of wall, or I guess a door or something like that. I can go to the type. I can click on that floor plan there, go to the type parameters, and then I can duplicate, which is the same way that you would normally do this for a system family. So I'm going to make a new type of floor plan. I'm going to call it joinery floor plan. At this point in time, I'm going to come back and have a look at this view template thing, because this is another really powerful tool inside Revit. So the first thing you'll note that is that whatever view was active at the time that happened, that has now been dropped into that particular discipline. That's typical of the way that Revit works. So let's just say that the intention was to make that joinery plan. of level 1, and we will say no, and we'll go here. Now we'll just say that in our particular practice we make these 1 to 50 scale, these joinery layout plans, and also in our practice we've got the visibility graphics here, and we'll go through. Now I can select these very quickly as a block by using Shift or by using the control keys, which again may not necessarily be something that you've realized. So what I'm going to do here is just very quickly go through and set up this view the way that I would typically want to see a joinery plan set up. So 1 to 50, room switched off. I'm not going to go into any more detail here, but I might just get rid of this one as well. So I'll go hide and view category. So visibility graphics overrides also affects 2D annotation objects as well, not just model objects. Okay, so we're reasonably satisfied with that. So then what we do is we utilize something, a very, very powerful tool in Revit, and that is to create a view template from the view. So we will call this a typical 1 to 50 joinery plan. Okay, and this is where we can actually just say, well, there may be certain properties or parameters inside this particular view that we might not necessarily want to impose on future plans of this type. So we can just go through and untick the actual properties or parameters that we don't want to apply in this view template. So we'll click OK. Alright, so now what we can do is if we go back to the type properties, and then now we've got this view template applied to. So what we do is we pick that 1 to 50 joinery plan and we apply that. So that what's going to happen now is automatically, if we do go to create a new view, then hopefully, fingers crossed, Revit should apply that view template. So to prove a point, well, hopefully to prove a point, we'll go to the view ribbon, we'll go to plan views, and we'll go floor plan. Now the interesting thing is that I've now got this additional subcategory, which means I can go here to joinery. If I click on edit type, you can see those are the same properties as I was looking at previously. So we'll say we want a level 2 joinery floor plan. We'll click OK. So now that has not only created the new view, it's also placed it in the correct type, which is the joinery floor plan. We'll do a quick rename on that one. Hopefully my ability to spell will not fail me. And just like magic, well, it's not really, the view template has automatically been applied. So you can see the amount of labor that saved us. We've now got a view set up, which will obviously require a little bit of love and care, as any view does when you first set it up. You notice that these parameters here are all grayed out when I select them, and that's because they're currently being locked into that view template. So the thing about the view template is it's not prohibitive in the sense that all I need to do, if I want to unlock that for any particular reason to make a modification to it, I can just click on that and go none, and that's now effectively unlocked those settings. So then I can come through and make any changes to these parameters. Revit does give you the ability in the view ribbon to also manage your view templates as well if you need to modify those over time. Okay, so that's a little bit about view templates, but it's also an interesting insight, I guess, into the fact that what Revit allows you to create these new subtypes. So I guess as an extension of that, I go to the view ribbon and then I go call out rectangle. So let's just say we're in that process now of going in and starting to make some joinery drawings. So we could, for example, take this call out that we've created, and we'll go into that one, and we'll duplicate that, and we might call that a detail plan. Now I'll just unlock it from this one, but what we would do is probably make a copy of the 1 to 50 and then probably change its properties to make it 1 to 20, but I won't bother doing that for this exercise. So that's now created another subdiscipline, joinery floor plan, detail plan, and again, we've got to go through and give that a new name. So we'll call that JO1 plan. And then what we can do is we can, again, as an extension of what we're discussing here, go through and create a new section, as you would do. And again, grab that, duplicate that, and we're making that a joinery section. If you wanted to, again, you could create a view template. One of the interesting things about view templates is that they do work across different view types. So there's a filter automatically being created here that just shows me view filters, view templates for that specific type of view. If I just went to all, you can see that my 1 to 50, for example, is showing up there. So I could, theoretically apply that automatically if I wanted to, even though it's not of the same type of view, strictly speaking. Now there is another thing I wanted to show you as well. Revit's probably automatically done this by itself, but it's an interesting concept. If I go back to my, let's just say I want to go to my normal floor plan, so this is my, say, 1 to 100 floor plans, and I'll just make a new floor plan for level 1. Okay, now you'll note that in this 1 to 100 I can actually see that section, and that's not what we want. I don't want to see all of the clutter of my joinery sections and elevations in this view. So what I can do is I can actually change the, I'll just set that to no template. Don't know why I did that, but anyway. If I change this to 1 to 100, you'll note that the section has disappeared. And the reason for that is that one of the properties of this particular, of sections and elevations, is that you've got this thing here called hide at scales quarter than. So what this means is if the view scale equals more than 1 to 50, or 1 to 100 effectively, then screen this from the view automatically, which is quite handy. So again, if we were to go in and make a new elevation, before we create it, we'll make a duplicate. Again, we might want to apply a view template to this. We'll go in and create that, grab that, make a view there. Again, we've got this hide at. I don't know why Revit insists on giving it a scale of 1 to 5,000. That's just one of those bizarre Revit things. But anyway, I'm sure there's a reason for it. I just haven't quite fathomed what that reason is. Okay, so we'll just grab that elevation like so, and we'll grab that like that. So again, that's in a new subdiscipline, joinery elevation, and because it's got that 1 to 50 property, if I go back to my normal floor plans, now for some reason I didn't, that was my problem, silly me. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to make a 1 to 100, and again you can see that elevation is missing, conspicuous in its absence, as they say. Okay, so that's all great. Now the other thing I wanted to talk about was the concept of, people often ask, especially during the fundamentals training, at what point do I make the transition from 3D into 2D? Where is that sort of line of demarcation? I guess the answer is there is no sort of hard and fast rule. But one of the things that I often say to people is that if you, from a practical point of view, don't need to present something to a client in 3D, and if it's more efficient to work in the 2D, then there's certainly no reason why you shouldn't consider doing it. Some people find that a little bit almost offensive, that you would suggest doing things in 2D in Revit because it's a 3D program, but we all have, well, I've worked in practices myself, so I understand about deadlines, and I understand about the fact that a project has to work at a profit, end of story. So that's where you have to start to think about being rational with these things. I'm going to create a reference plane for the purposes of making a piece of joinery here, and I'm going to actually name that reference plane, because by doing that, that then allows me to come back later and actually grab that reference plane if I want to construct something. So I'm going to go to this section view, and this is typical of, I guess, Revit's sort of messiness. Anyway, we'll go to 1 to 20. So what I'm going to do is use an in-place family. Okay, so modeling in place is a very useful tool in Revit, very powerful. Generally recommended to not use modeling in place when you want to actually have more than one of something in a project. But in this case, it's just a bespoke piece of casework. So I'm going to just select the casework category. And in this case, it's like, this is J01, so I'll just call it that. And now what I'm going to do is create a simple extrusion. If you remember earlier, I said about creating that reference plane and giving it a name. That allows me to now pick that. So I'm creating an extrusion. That reference plane is, try that again. Yep, okay, that's good. So it's not, for some reason, not showing me the reference plane as I would expect, but the reference plane essentially is now a vertical plane in space. And so when I create the profile of my fancy piece of joinery, I should be able to then draw like so. That was pretty close to 100. Please don't critique my design. I know you're probably thinking, oh, that looks really awful, but anyway. Okay, so here we go. We'll finish that. Now, again, we just have to do a little bit of cleaning up. So we'll maybe go to the level 1 joinery plan. And typical of Revit, it's actually drawn the object the sort of wrong direction to what I intended, but that's fine. So there's my joinery item. So, in elevation view, we could go through it at a 1 to 20 call out, as I made before, and start to label that up with a bit of detail elements. But let me just grab that and go to the elevation view. Okay, so there's a few bits and pieces here. We've gone, if assuming we've gone past the design development stage and we've got sign off, we'll just get rid of all that paraphernalia because we really don't need it in this type of drawing. Annotate, detail line. Now, people do say that, I guess, drafting inside Revit can be quite tedious. I suppose all drafting is tedious, but I guess there's methodologies that you can use to try to make that process as unpainful as possible. So, for example, the pick line tool, and if I go here and set the offset to say 32, I can get Revit to create a line representing the carcass there, 32 mils off. Let's make this 1 to 20. I'll just hide that particular view because that's not relevant to what we're doing here. Just do a little bit of cleaning up. Okay, so we've grabbed that there, and then I can just simply use the mirror command to, where's the center of this object? There it is. So again, just using the sort of simple editing tools that are available to me. I don't have to go to some great lengths to be exact and place things exactly where I want them to be. I'm just going to create some thin lines here to represent the doors. I'm going to use the copy command, or set it to multiple and constrain. I'll drag those across just so I'm happy approximately with the number. Then I'll use my dimension tool, my good old friend, the equality constraint, like so. Now, what I can do is I can select these objects here, these pieces of line work, make a copy. Now, if I'm going to represent, say, a 16mm carcass behind that, I'll just drag them out by 8 mils. Revit conveniently keeps the objects that have just been created selected. So all I need to do now is go and change the line style. They're still actively selected. And now I can just copy those across 16mm like so. And I got my casework showing up like that. So you can see that that process there has been relatively straightforward, hasn't been too tedious. If I grab that and type CS into the keyboard, that's create similar. So that sets me up now to create some more line work like so of the same type. And then I could go through and start adding in some other detail lines like so. Okay, well this is getting a bit too much like actually working in an actual practice, so I'm going to stop doing this now. No, joking. Okay, so sorry. What I do want to show to you though is something that's very, very powerful that can actually save you a considerable amount of time. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, if I go here to the new family dialog, and if I go to metric detail item and click open. Okay, so what we've got here is just it's a two-dimensional object. It's a two-dimensional family, but it's not annotative. It's not annotative in the same way as a piece of text or a symbol is. And by that I mean it's actually a one-to-one scale object. So what I'm going to do here is create something that represents like a D-pool handle that you would see in an elevation. I'll start here and drag across, and let's just say D-pool handle is going to be 8mm overall, and it's going to be, say, to start things off, we'll make it 80 mils high. We'll go across 8, drag that down. Okay, drag that over. Okay, thank you. Right. Now, one of the things I didn't do, which I should have done really at the start, is I should have created this is going to be parametric. So what I mean is that rather than just being fixed at a particular size, which I could just do here, I'm actually going to set this up so that I can actually adjust the height of the D-pool handle. So I'm going to create a reference plane across the top. And in Revit, when you're making anything parametric, the absolute thing that you've got to nail right at the start is getting your reference plane set up. And then what you're effectively doing, whether it's 2D objects or 3D objects, is you're constraining your objects to those particular reference planes. In this case, I'm just going to make that a very simple locked dimension because I don't need that to be parametric. Now the magic really begins when I just go in here and I make this, I make a dimension, but then I go in here and I add a parameter to it. So it becomes what's called a labeled dimension. And if I just call that handle height, we will make that a type parameter. That means to say that this will be pre-locked into, it'll be locked into preset handle heights rather than allowing the user to dynamically change the handle height in every single instance. So we'll go here to family type dialog, and there's no family types at the moment, so we'll make a new one. We'll call that 80 millimeters high. Just copy that. And then we'll go through and we'll make a new one, and we will call that 100 millimeters high. But Revit then requires us to sort of fill in all of these parameters, and we'll hit the apply button. You can see in the background there that that's resized itself. The line works restretched itself correctly. So I know that this is, I've tested this, so to speak, so I'm happy that that's going to work. So I'll call that D-pool detail, I don't know, I'll just call it that, D-pool. Actually, no, I'll call that 80, 100 millimeters. There you go. That'll probably make more sense to somebody. So I'll go load into project, and then I'll go back to my elevation, and then I'll actually go to, no, it's in the annotate ribbon. This is the confusing part. At least it used to confuse me when I first started using Revit. So this detail element, even though it is not annotative, it's scaled, is still in the annotate section. So there it is there. There's my little D-pool handle. Now because of the way that the family was constructed, if I go to change the height, did that work? Yes, it did. Okay. You'll see that it's actually moving from the base up. So that's an interesting scenario, and I'll show you a little trick there to get around that. At the moment, when I click to place the object in the project, you'll see these two reference planes here. You'll note that there's a little parameter in them that says defines origin. Now, where those two intersect, that's the insertion point, I guess, to use a sort of an AutoCAD type of terminology. And that also means that when the object gets rescaled, it will rescale from that point. So hopefully, if I click on that top one that I created and go defines origin, I know that this will now untick itself because Revit can't have two that define origin. I'll save it, load it into my project. Now, hopefully, if I change that, this will resize itself. There you go. So it's resizing itself from the top, which is good. That means if I change my mind and I've got a different handle height, then if I change it, I'm not going to end up with my handles moving up into my joinery. They're going to move them. They're going to stay at the same fixed height and get longer or shorter from the top, which is good. All right. So that's a detail element. But the other thing which is really powerful is this repeated detail. Now, which brings me to another point, and that is this. If I go open project, and I go to my metric library, and I go to my sample files and repeating details, I just want to show you something. If you've never ever looked inside these sample projects, you've got to go and have a look at them, maybe do a printout of some of the stuff that's in them. What we've got here is a bit of a treasure trove or a junkyard. I guess that really depends on your what analogy you want to use. But these are detail elements that are actually sort of like a rule-based object. So you sort of have a detail element, and you tell Revit that you want to create a row of them that are repeating at, say, 1200 mils or whatever. So this stud work, for example, if I select that and click Control-C, go back into my, nope, not that one, go back into my project. So it's getting a little bit confused there for some reason. So I'll just paste that one in, and you can see now, obviously it's not really relevant perhaps to this particular type of drawing, but what we've now got is the ability to lay out a row of studs at a preset distance just by clicking and clicking. You can go into these and actually change the rules. So for example, this is a good example of where you might change this to maximum spacing, because when you set out stud work, it's usually set out to a maximum spacing of 600. That way you get those in the most efficient way. So in this case, Revit will work out a maximum spacing of 600 between the 2 points that you click. which is very handy. The other thing, though, is the fact that there is a pretty massive library of detail elements already installed when you install Revit. And if you're working in a large practice, you might find that there's a pretty large library that's been created to sort of augment this as well. So if I go to metal fastenings, let's just try to find something a little bit relevant. So we've got a screw countersunk, so you can see that this object here, it is actually parametric. It's sort of a bit hidden when I go into the family editor here to have a look at it, but inside the family editor there's actually visibility graphics override settings as well. And at the moment, the dimensioning and reference planes have all been hidden. So you can see there's a labeled parameter, and that's going to allow me to change the length of that screw. So I'll load that into my project. Now that's just your bog standard sort of detail element. But again, just to illustrate a point, if I go into this particular repeating detail, go edit type, duplicate. Again, this is the same process that you'll find with any of these objects. You create one as a duplicate. So we'll go countersunk screws at, we'll make it 500 cc's, and then it's just a matter of picking the correct detail element. So we'll say 75 mils, 590 degrees clockwise, counterclockwise, I believe, should actually work. And there it is. So it's just a question of just drawing those out. So you can see that's a pretty powerful tool there. People may not be aware of it, or may just use the ones that are in the library and not be aware of the fact that you can actually do some pretty powerful things with it. Okay, so just being conscious of time, I just want to move on to a few other little tips and tricks. All right, so Revit has the ability to create filled regions, as you are, I'm sure, well aware. And so I've got a filled region here. The reason I can see the model objects behind that is because in its properties it's set, oh, actually that's not true. It's set to opaque, sorry. If I change it to transparent, then that will actually change the way it behaves, and it will allow me to see 3D elements behind it. Okay, one of the things that's not immediately apparent again is that if I click on that and go edit boundary and then select the boundary, I can actually change the line type. Okay, that's cool. But what if I change it to invisible lines? Well, what I get is basically a filled region with no boundary line around it, which could be quite handy. So that's something to be aware of. That same principle also applies to masking regions. So by default, a masking region actually has a thin line around it, or in this case it does. So again, if I just click on that and go invisible lines, then you can see now that that's acting like, I guess, true whiteout. It is effectively masking everything and it doesn't have an edge around it. That's just something I wanted to bring to people's attention if they haven't been sort of aware of that. Okay, just another thing. See if I can find an example. Okay, so I've got this drawing here. Now, probably not really the best example, but just bear with me. If I, for whatever reason, I'll change that crop region, just for the sake of this exercise. Okay, so I'm going to change that. Let's see. Okay, so what we've got is a situation, just theoretically, where perhaps this plan really needs to be rotated around, so perhaps it can fit on the sheet properly. Not really a terribly good example because I don't really have a different orientation of sheet to illustrate that. But okay, so what you've got here in the standard properties of this particular view is the ability to rotate the view on the sheet. And that's all fine and well, except that when I do that, what will actually happen is that the actually, let me just deactivate that. It's already deactivated. Okay. So what will actually happen is as you probably realize when you've done this, is that the actual title rotates as well. So one of the tricks I just wanted to show you was if I activate that view and grab the crop region, if I hit the rotate command and just say turn that around 90 degrees, you'll note that the view is actually rotated, but you'll also see if you look down here that the view title has not rotated. So that's just a little bit of a trick. Got to be careful with this though, just to make sure that if you're working in a team that other people are aware of the fact that you've done that. And the reason I say that is because if I actually go to that view, you'll see that that's actually rotated. So you can really play with people's brains here if you're doing stuff like that without actually letting them be aware of it. Fun and games. Okay, so that's just another little trick, and very quickly I just wanted to illustrate something to you that is very, very powerful. Now in this scale of project, probably not so applicable, but I think scope boxes are something which are very useful to be aware of. I'll just give you an example of what I mean. So we're going to go into View, we're going to create a scope box at the top of the project and a scope box at the bottom of the project. So I'll go scope box and I'll just bring that down here and we'll align it to that. We'll give it a name and we'll call it North. And then what I can do is if I go to a 3D view, for example, you'll see that object is now showing up there. So I can come in here and just grab that and resize it, or go to an elevation view, whatever is more applicable, get that the right sizing. And then rather than making a new one, I can actually take that same scope box, which is that one there. Actually, no, that's not. Just bear with me for a second here. Just crop that view. So there's the scope box there, and I'm going to make a copy of it, and I'll call that South. Okay, so what's the point in all that? Well, the point is that a few things. First of all, if I were to go into my floor plans and I go to level 1, for example, yeah, I need to drag that down a little bit. There you go. Okay, so if I go into this plan here, and if this was a very, very large project, like a hospital project, it wouldn't be inconceivable that I might have to split it up over 8 different sheets. So in that case, what you do is you use this thing called View Duplicate as Dependent. So I'm going to make 2 duplicate as dependents in this case. In the top case, I'm going to rename this one, and I'm actually just going to call this North. And in the case of something like a hospital, where you've got maybe 8 different segments, then you would obviously give those a name that reflected maybe your grids or so forth. So that's the first part. I've got my 2 dependent views, but the next part is for me to go here to this North one and apply my scope box. I've just got to find that here in my list. This is where I always suffer from domestic blindness. So that was North. Okay, good. And South. So again, you can see what Revit's done now. And this is sort of, the bugbear a lot when you're setting up views in Revit, is this whole idea of, when Revit creates views, they're quite messy, and you've got to reorganize the grids and the levels and so forth to make them look correct. So with these views here, you can do things like you can actually apply the scope boxes to them automatically, or as an example, if I go here and I'll create a new section like so. What I'll then do is I'll go into that view and I'll apply a scope box as well. So let me just find the correct one, and you can see that that's done a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more organization there, depending on the extent of the scope box as to where it actually places the, because when you create a section, Revit does these strange things or elevations where they're sort of random heights and widths and so forth, or seemingly random. So that takes care of a little bit of that. But there's another aspect to this too, which is really cool. If I've got, say, a 20-story building and it's got those same 8 different segments in them, what Revit allows me to do is go to this one here that has those dependent views, right-click, and go Apply Dependent Views, and then Revit says, well, what levels do you want to do it to? I'll say I want to apply it to level 2, click OK. So now what you can see here is that those dependent views have been created, but not only that, they've also automatically been segmented up, so to speak, so that the crop regions match the ones up here. So you can see that that's a very powerful tool to be able to take a project, split it up into different segments, and then apply that same organization throughout all the different floor plans in my view. So I think that's actually a very powerful tool. And if you ever do work in a large organization that works on, say, health type projects, you're going to see that those are the sort of tricks that they use to replicate their views and organize their views quickly. Okay, well, we've gone up to almost an hour, and assuming that you're all still awake after all that, if anybody's got any questions, I'm quite happy for maybe the next 5 minutes. Okay, I've got one here that says, can masking regions be created in irregular polygonal forms? Interesting. Okay. Well, let's see. If we go to create a new floor plan, we'll just go foundation. So we'll say we want to show the crop region. If I go edit crop, then yes, I've now got the ability as of I think 2015 to basically create a crop region pretty much whatever shape I want to suit my project. So there is that scope now inside Revit to pretty much create a crop region that follows exactly the outline of your building, for example. So hopefully that answers your question, Victor. Didn't pick that one up when I was talking before. Okay, so has anybody else got any questions? What's happening with the weather? What's going on in politics? Is there any record for this webinar? Yes, there actually is. I am recording this. I remembered to hit the record button. So we'll put that up on the go-to website. There'll be a link up there, and then you get to listen to my droning voice for another 50 minutes if you want to, or you can perhaps play it at twice the speed and I'll sound like a chipmunk. It's up to you. Scope boxes. Yeah, I don't think scope boxes are quite as flexible as all that. They're really just built into, they're just designed to be, well, they're not a rectangle. Well, yeah, they are a rectangle. They're a true rectangle. But they're 3D rectangles. So, yeah, you don't have that ability to... You do have the ability, though, I think, I'll just double check this to make sure I'm not telling a fib, but you can rotate them. But that's probably about as close as you get to having them as sort of, in any way, non-rectangular. But no, you can't go out of that shape. Okay. I don't think I've got any more questions. Right. Well, I think we'll wind things up. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I always appreciate, when I put out an invite that people do respond, and it's always very encouraging. I hope you got something out of this demonstration. There may be a lot of stuff that you may have already gotten. Oh, hang on. We've got a late incomer. Oh, we've got a late one. Can you change reference plane color without overriding properties? I think that's actually in the object style, I believe. If we go to, I believe it's in here. Revision reference planes. There it is. So reference planes are actually controlled by object styles. So that green aligned line is controlled by the object style, and you could set a default color so that they do show up a particular color that you want. And as you said in your question there, you can change the color in a specific view by using override by element as well. Okay, that's good. All right, well, thank you, everyone. And as I said, we'll make that link available to everybody, and hopefully you'll have gotten something out of that. And perhaps if you can share it with other people in your office, then it might make your process a little bit more